Okay, let's try this again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, boys and girls. How are we all doing today? No, it wasn't because nobody hacked me, okay? Just for posterity's sake, so I broadcasted this. I started this broadcast, and then almost immediately my internet died. uh, Turns out it was just a router connectivity issue as opposed to anything else. Um, but now we have an entire conspiracy theory going on that our boy Vlad does not want me to talk about this, which doesn't make any sense, right? Like this is more of advice than it is criticism. So, well, not even advice, just counterfactual, right? It's a thought experiment. That's what we're doing today. So, what are we doing today? So most of you will know since we've discussed this now. Oh, I spelled Russian wrong. I'll edit that in post. No, that's okay. And I spelled thought wrong. Of course I did. Oh my god, it's just one of those days. Yes, I did just come back from a Oh, fuck. Yes, I did just come back from a work trip, and the drive was not pleasant. I'll put it that way. Well, it's yeah. So yeah, okay. Let's talk about this, right? Since obviously we only have half an hour to do this, and our boys at the Security Council are meeting in what 45 minutes, and I do want to sit in on that meeting, so we should wrap this up quick, like. So, yeah, like really briefly for those of you who aren't into history, Kiev is essentially the source of the Russian people, of the Orthodox Russian people. Kievan Rus and all of that. Like that was sort of the foundation of the entire. Well, I wouldn't go as far as to say the entire Slavic people, but certainly there is a very tight historical connection between Kiev and the Russian people, and that's why Kiev being in Ukraine has always. Good night, bread. You don't. Yeah, please don't stick around. I assume like this will not be interesting to anyone except for those in the server. So in the private classroom. So I wouldn't expect any of our public school viewers or public school lurkers to really ever be part of this. Anyway, so Kiev is considered by some the source of Russian civilization, right? And in such a way that, you know, while it was part of the Russian Empire, while it was part of the Soviet Union. Oh my god, Brad, please just go to bed. This is not going to be interesting. Anyway, while it was considered by some to be source of the or while it was part of the Soviet Union, it didn't matter, right? And so ever since the complete reconquest of sort of the Crimean lands, the Crimean Khanate, you know, the Golden Horde and all of that, Kiev has essentially been part of Russia. It might have sort of been slightly more independent. It might have been more or less dependent by bread. Oh, bread. It might have been more or less what am I trying to say? Right, more or less independent, but it was always sort of a part of Russia, and therefore this is a problem that never really came up until the dissolution of the Soviet Union, right? Like, as long as Russia, or and by extension the Soviet Union had great power status, and as long as it was the most powerful, like as long as Ukraine and Kiev were tightly within its sphere of influence, it didn't really matter. But of course now it's different, and that's why, compared to things like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, even Poland, even Belarus to some extent, right? Like even all of those don't compare to the need to hold on to Ukraine and Kiev from a cultural perspective, right? And so, like, like after Perestroika and my boy Gorbachev, it was thought. Give me 1 second. One quick second. Okay. Back to the story, and so after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, there was Ukraine had some nuclear weapons, and so with the agreement, I can't remember where it was signed. Doesn't matter. Essentially, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees from both Russia and the West that it would remain always independent. And this was mid 1990s. And that was fine for 20 odd years until 2014. Well, even until before then, during when, what was his face, Yanukovych. Yeah, so Ukraine was run by oligarchs, just like Russia was, and there was a revolution that kicked out the local oligarch that had sort of made the country, or that had kept the country disparate enough, in some ways federalized, in some ways actually we should call it cliquey enough, right? Like there were enough cliques within the government, within the armed forces, within security, that it was easy for Russia to exert its influence on Ukraine, and therefore keep it within its sphere of influence. Once that revolution had come and gone, I can't remember when it was. Honestly doesn't matter. Anyway, the point is, it culminated in the takeover of Crimea and the rebellion in Donetsk and Luhansk in 2014. Right, and ever since then, this conflict has been smoldering with our boy Vladimir always adhering to this idea of that Minsk agreement of essentially forming a highly decentralized federal state in Ukraine, such that he can exert influence from the newly empowered, would you call them oblasts? Are they? Well, anyway, in the Donbass, right? In Donetsk and Luhansk, and via that federalist system, retain control over all of Ukraine by being able to essentially have a veto over the national path forward, right? So actually, I should write that down. 14 Minsk using Donetsk. Oh my god, need to look up Donetsk, right? Yeah, okay. And I do need to look this one up. Luhansk. Federated governments to retain effective control over Ukrainian politics, Ukrainian national politics, right? so that was the idea. That, of course, that never got anywhere, and of course, Ukraine understood exactly what it was trying to do by doing this, and so therefore that had always dragged on. And so for the past week or two, the idea had been, from the West at least, if we can control the war, or rather to prevent the war by re-energizing the Minsk agreement. I think it was 2015 actually. Let me that in 2015 to re-energize the Minsk agreement by and therefore prevent war by essentially implementing it. Obviously, Ukraine itself actually doesn't want this, right? I mean, no, I don't think anyone would want this, because it is essentially an effective veto. In it, Russia would only be satisfied with the new constitution, where these two federal provincial governments would essentially have a veto over national policy, and so therefore that would be its only outcome if it were pushed through, right? So obviously Ukraine does not welcome this. In some ways, you would say that Ukraine is actually relieved. Like, obviously, everyone has to be extremely angry about what has happened. Subtitle. Recognition for the independent states of Donetsk and spell for the life of me, that's okay. Right, so there is that recognition for those two independent states. Yeah, essentially, right? And when are they meeting? 35 minutes, we have time. When is... Oh, there is a UN Security Council meeting that's going to talk about this at 9 p.m. EST. So I want to sit in on that meeting just to listen in. So we'll wrap up before then. Yes. What did I want to say? Oh yes, Ukraine is actually relieved because Minsk agreement is dead, right? So the moment that the independence was sort of recognized by Russia, then obviously this kind of federated government this structure is never going to happen. I think that makes perfect sense from any perspective, right? Like, it's simply not something that Ukraine now has to consider, because secretly since secretly they never wanted to consider it. And so that's sort of the background. Now we get to the thought experiment part. If I were Vlad. Actions. No war. There is literally no reason for Vlad to go to war, at least in my mind. Given what I understand of human nature, I do not think it is at all necessary to go to war. 20, there we go. We should say no need for. Right, I think that makes it a little bit more clear. So why is there no need for war, right? Like, let's think about real quick what the ultimate goal here is. And we have all heard, or I mean some of us, actually quite a few of us, interestingly, have sort of heard these briefings from, or I say of us, I actually am one of the ones that don't have access to these security briefings. So I can obviously only hear it from news sources, like one of the ones I consult more often is you guys know, from news sources we hear these security briefings say about the ramp up to war, about how the Sivloki, the securitocrats, right, the security apparatus in Russia is sort of calling the shots on why they might want war, why they are not afraid of sanctions, obviously because they've like the guys at the top have already been sanctioned. So obviously, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Why am I not encoding properly? What's wrong today? My packets keep getting encoded. I wonder if they're saturating my line. Oh, you know what? That's probably it. Okay, give me one quick second. I seem to have... Oh, that's... Really? I've been 10 megabit per second line. Okay, just give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. We're gonna change the video bitrate to 3500. Change the video bitrate to 3500 in both Twitch and YouTube. Because Discord is fine, as far as I can tell, right? You guys on Discord are fine, right? Yeah, okay. So Discord is fine. Anyway, yeah, so the securitocrats, obviously they have all had their sanctions already applied to them, so after Crimea. And so this isn't really a big change for them per se, right? If we're honest. So why would they want to go to war for this? At least from my personal perspective, I don't think there is a case for war. Right? If I were that, I would do something more. Because the goal, actually, let's have a goal to show the West is weak, essentially. To show that the West is weak. And to sow discord such that Russia remains, I would say, retains its sphere, right? So let's have that as our ultimate goal, and to achieve this goal, you actually don't want to fight, right? Let's be completely honest about this. Fighting actually doesn't achieve this goal. Fighting would only unite the governments and shall we say it would give impetus to put money into counterintelligence. New line. Give impetus into counterintelligence. Fight. Let's call it disinformation. Fight harder against disinformation, right? Because I mean, we have all seen the disinformation campaign that has been going on since even before 2016, right? And so, yeah, like I would argue that it would actually be counterproductive for them to make the anti-disinformation campaign give more power to that. So honestly, the best. Well, obviously, I'm not a dictator, right? Like, well, to be fair, I am the teacher of the various private and public school classrooms. So by the power vested in me as the teacher compared to all of you students, I should have dictatorial powers in this particular community, right? And I think there's no one that could argue against that. Let me put it that way. Anyway, the point that I'm laboriously trying to get to is this. Oops. Don't fight the war on land. Fight the war on get to the goal. Emperor Muses. I would hate to be an emperor. actually. That's so much work. Okay, let's take a detour and talk about dictators for a second. Everybody thinks that dictators can just do what they say and it will be done. That's obviously not true, right? Like, the dictator is just a dude. He's even got dick in his name, right? Like, he's just a dude, or she, just a dude or girl dude, and you need to, as a dictator, rely on people to get your work done. And by the very nature of humanity, that means the dictator is essentially the best balanced politician, the best politician of the entire group, right? Or unless he's a figurehead, in which case that's a different issue. A viable dictator is always the best politician because he or she is able to balance the various interest groups that are underneath and make sure that they're fighting each other instead of plotting against the dictator, right? Like think of it this way. Think of the various parties that you would have in an absolutely perfect democracy. Every person gets to vote for one party that represents their exact interests. Or let's say every person gets to vote for up to, or there are 10 total parties and everyone gets to vote for 10 parties. And the vote is exactly one man, one vote that goes to the 10 parties, right? So those 10 parties would be a quasi-perfect representation of the interest groups that exist in the country. Now, those interest groups don't disappear if you have a dictator in charge, right? Those interest groups shift and pivot, but they certainly exist even with even with in a one-party state, right? The best way I can explain this. Dictators 1. Balancing IGs. And I'm using Victoria 4, no, Victoria 3 terminology, but that's fine. Balancing parties that are interest groups below the dictator, therefore politician, therefore boring job. Let's put it that way. Or actually, let me give one of the most perfect examples, or two of the most perfect examples. Examples. The most perfect, number one, is the, I want this LDP. It is the LDP, right? Yes, it is the LDP. LDP Japan. This is the party that has ruled Japan since the end of World War II, with the exception of like less than a decade. So this is broad conservative party, remnants of the old civil service and conservative interests. Okay, so this is a party that has ruled Japan since the end of World War II. Excuse me. And internal party politics, Trump national, right? So there are various big factions inside the LDP that essentially do their own campains, right? And that's why our boy Kishida, who took over from our boy Suga, who in turn took over from our boy Shinzo Abe, they are all LDP leaders, but they're all from slightly different, well, Suga and Abe are basically the same, but they're all from slightly different cliques within the LDP. And that's why the pick of the next LDP leader in terms of Kishida was actually looked on so closely, or almost as closely as a national election, because the LDP was essentially going to win most elections. Like there's very little that the opposition, in terms vis-a-vis the CDP and all the communists, whatever, they don't really have a good way of getting onto the national stage, and so therefore the LDP, like internal LDP elections, are essentially elections for the next prime minister, right? And again, this comes back to our talk about dictators and balancing interest groups and stuff. So even in a one-party state, in a full democratic but quasi one-party state that is Japan, you can see that a party is not just a party of everyone thinking the same thing, right? And so that's what it reflects here. The second example, I know we're going over time. It's fine. It's fine. I'll sit in on the Security Council meeting. We have 25 minutes. It's okay. I'll just end in 25 minutes and I'll hop over. It's all good. Conservative Party, you bloody K. The Conservatives. Oh my God. I wish Michael Gove, please do a how. Okay. If you get it, you get it. If you don't get it, don't worry about it. The Conservative Party does this thing where, like after Brexit, David Cameron essentially had to resign, and therefore Theresa May made it. But then Theresa didn't manage to do things properly, and that's why we're left with Bojo, right? David begets Theresa begets Bojo. And this is very much still the behavior of a one-party state, right? Sidewinder. Sidewinder, I'll explain it to you afterwards, but essentially Howe was an ally, of a firm ally of the Iron Lady, Lady Thatcher. And at the end of her tenure, it was Howe calmly standing up in the House of Commons and just eviscerating her in front of the entire House of Commons that actually brought down her government and her premiership as the First Lord of the Treasury. That doesn't matter. Essentially, Margaret Thatcher was brought down by Howe, who was her closest ally. Not important. What did I want to say? Internal party politics is larger than national. And this was fortuitous, right? This was very, very important, because Jeremy, not Clarkson, Corbyn. Can you imagine if Jeremy Clarkson? If Jeremy Clarkson was running the show. Anyway, not important. So Jeremy Corbyn of Labour ensured that conservatives were functioning as a one-party state in the UK post. Right. Does that kind of make sense? So this is my talk on dictators. We're going to completely ignore that now and move on to something else. Right, dictators. Vladimir Putin. That's where we got sidetracked. To get to the goal, remember the goal is this, right? This is the goal. Let's point that bad boy over here. To get to the goal. Oh, did I not? I haven't used Affinity Designer in forever, just don't shoot me, please. To get to the goal by undermining the West. And what is the best way to undermine the West? It is to undermine the message that they're sending, right? Both America and Europe, especially UK, have been going on and on and on about Russia attacking. But if you go and look closely at the civil discourse, most normal people do not give a fuck not only do they not give a fuck, they don't even think. They simply don't think that it's going to happen, and that's simply because they've been inundated since 2014 about Russia attacking Ukraine and about there going to be there starting to be a war and all of that lovely stuff. Not lovely, all of that all of that fear mongering by using the fear mongering, right? Like, we know for a fact, because we've seen them in action, that the Russian external intelligence services have very firm and very efficient ways of encouraging fear-mongering and sort of piggybacking of social issues, right? So Russian intelligence is very apt at piggybacking off social turmoil to undermine governments. That's simply something that they have done, and there is ample evidence for it, and we have seen it in action, and we have caught them doing it red-handed. So it's like we know that they do this, and so what better way is to then recreate the oops, don't fight. Sorry, no, I forgot to say. I forgot to say this. Fight the war on land. There's no need to fight that war. The goal is to do that, and so therefore create situations that promote fear-mongering headlines. Do not start a war. Oops. Do not start a war. And then use the intelligence machinery to essentially undermine the fearmongers. Does that kind of make sense? Essentially, forget the spelling mistakes. Fucking hell, guys. Just whatever. Monger. Learn these spelling. It's fine. So, and then the key is do this 10 to 12 times over a decade, or maybe not 10 to 12. We'll do this, let's say 6 to 8 times over a decade. And what will this do? This will reduce trust between the public, the Western public, and their security, political establishments. This will fracture society along essentially biases. Let's call them political. No, I don't want to say political headings, but essentially, you can imagine that if you do this often enough, and then you jam in your own fear-mongering via the methodology that you have essentially perfected. Oh, actually, yay Facebook. Let's do that. No, of course they're no longer on Facebook. Am I not allowed to? Oh, I can't? Oh, that's a shame. Okay. Meta. We will do this the hard way. Right? So you undermine your local your opponent's government, and you do this enough times such that you're reducing the trust. You're making it harder and harder every time for the message. Make it harder. every time for the message of war to get through to the jaded population, right? And we can sort of see that happening already, because I have talked to sort of average people, like, well, I have friends who have average friends. um, no, that's obviously a joke, but no, I have a lot of very very good friends that are just normal people in society. And if you ask them, you get that very, very clear idea that they simply do not give a fuck. Like, zero shits are given, because it has come and gone so many times that nobody really understands this, right? Like you can kind of understand it if it were Ukrainians. If the Ukrainians didn't, and in fact they don't, right? You can understand when the Ukrainians are jaded about war, but people over here, they should be even more jaded, because of course they're farther away. Their government has been screaming about this for the last, essentially, almost a decade, right? Since 2014, this has been a recurring headline. And so you make it harder for the message of war to get through to the jaded population, and this increases war wariness before war even starts, and disrupts societal structures. And what else does it do? It oops, leads to, how do we say? It leads to the need to be ever more. Well, I mean, we've essentially talked about that. Up here. It's to be ever more hysterical when the threat analysis is real, right? And that's, we see that happening now. I just don't see why they would need to stop this, actually, right? Like, I'll well, it's true. Mm-hmm. No. The point isn't to then bring about the fall of the Western civilization. That's not the point. No, absolutely not. It's just to make that society not pleasant to live in. Does that kind of make sense? I can't spell structures, yes. Thank you. That's wonderful that you managed to catch that. Thank you very much. Also, can you imagine any autocorrect that doesn't understand Facebook? The word Facebook? Yes, I understand it's a proper noun, not the point. This is not a grammar speech, though we can talk about grammar if it's absolutely desired. But I have no desire to talk about grammar. Okay, let's be quite clear about that. The point I'm laboriously trying to get to, can you let me please finish the point, is that if I were Vlad, this would, you would, like, this is already happening, and can be pushed further with the right actions, right? Like, I think it's fairly obvious that the more hysterical Joe is, and the less the army invades, the more like, how do I say this? The conservative media in the US is already waiting to pounce on Joe. If Russia does not attack and simply pulls back, they will have plenty of, shall we call it, issues to take up versus the Biden administration, right? Like, this is simply a known fact. There is no, oops, that didn't go well. Let's include the, Excuse me. If I were Vlad. Is that how that song goes? I only know that because some Chinese girl sang it once on one of those singing shows. That Well, the point remains. Um, if I were Vlad, this is what I would do. Right? This is I would not fight. There is no need to fight this. Uh, like the goal, they can talk all fine about protecting Slavic people, preventing Ukraine from joining NATO and all of that. I don't think that they are concerned about Russia being. I okay. It is my personal feeling, and here we're getting away from the thought experiment. It is my personal feeling that I do not think the Vlad is, or if I were Vlad, I would not be concerned about a NATO envelopment of Russia. I'm gonna be dead in 10, 20 years. It genuinely doesn't matter, right? Like, my children are safe and hidden. My mistresses are known, but okay. No, okay. Let's rephrase that. Vlad's children are hidden, even though his mistresses are known. There we go. There we go. Just prevent. Don't clip that. If you clip that, I'm going to sue. No, I'm not. The context is very clear. The children, like, if he cares about his children, I'm sure they could survive the fall of Russia. Absolutely. Assets everywhere. I'm absolutely certain that most of the people at the top will have no problem surviving the fall of Russia. So I do not think that it is the fall of Russia that they are truly concerned about. I wouldn't. In that same position, I would make sure that if I had children in that same position, I would make sure that they would have the resources to live outside of the country, right? And I'm certain that is the case. So, is it really a concern for the greatness of Russia? Do these people are realists, right? Remember, they grew up in the KGB. That's not to say that they're not patriotic. That's not to say that they don't love the idea of a strong Russia. I cannot bring myself to accept that they are patriots before they are people, right? These are billionaires. They're billionaires through slightly less kind means, and so obviously, like, their wealth is not exactly, you know, kindly begotten, but they are billionaires nonetheless. And to be a billionaire is most oftentimes to be a realist. You have to be realistic about what you're able to achieve. You have to be realistic about the chances, right? Like, they certainly used the privatization of Soviet industry in the Yeltsin administration to do really good for themselves, and that's fantastic for them, right? Well, okay, I shouldn't put it that way. That has guaranteed their future. So I do not think that they are again, back to the original point. I do not think they're patriots, and therefore I would find it hard to imagine them being patriots. Again, right? Like, patriotism, I don't know if we don't have time to talk about patriotism, but patriotism is not something that patriotism is one of the ways that the elite uses to control the masses. World War I was a direct result of patriotism. The ability to mobilize so many men on such a short time is first and foremost the ultimate representation of patriotism, of its foibles, of what it is able to achieve, right? And personally, I always consider World War II a simple redux of World War One. The underlying issues hadn't been solved by World War II, and so therefore they caused the same kind of problems, and that was nationalism. Again, it's always back down to nationalism, right? And it was used to such a great effect to throw even more innocent, semi-innocent boys into the grind. Absolutely, 100%. So as a billionaire, I do not think that billionaires are patriots above realists. It's simply not something that it might be naive of me to say so. I do. I'm typing with a broken finger. Okay, give me a break. I do not. In the security industrial complex are more paid now. I think let's put it this way. Let's use an active tone. I think the billionaires are realists more than patriots. And that really is the point, right? I think our boy Vlad really sells himself as a patriot for good reason, because it really does make his case easier when he then goes to sell it to the Russian people, right? And so I'll admit I would be surprised if they ended up being proving themselves to be patriots, like above being. Why did that? Here, take that. Right. So I would be surprised if that were a thing. Yeah, I think that's about it for today. We have really gone a little bit off topic. Not too much, just a little bit. Well, this. Okay. Well, again, absolutely. This reflects my opinion. It doesn't reflect your opinion, right? Like I don't need it to reflect your opinion. Your opinion is crap most of the time. The point remains that excellent. We have a nice black border. Yeah. This is basically this part of the conversation, right? Like, it's questions. Well, I mean, let's finish in like 30 seconds because my boys are starting. If the war starts, will I look like a massive, massive knob? A little bit, yes, but this is only one interpretation of the events, right? So let's be realistic and say, if the war does start, I'm sure there are other reasons because this remains true even if the word war starts, right? Unfortunately, I don't think we'll get a good answer to this in your lifetimes, maybe in mine, but it is fascinating, isn't it? Yeah, because the fate of an entire civilization is sort of balanced right now, right? It was balanced in 2013 when the revolution happened against Victor. I think his name was Victor. And it was balanced when Russia sent in their quote-unquote little green men that took over Crimea. And right now it hangs again in the balance. I would love that, Sidewinder. Oh my god. Could we just, get everyone together for one big game of laser tag? Everyone's equipment just gets replaced with laser tag equipment. I would oh my god. That would be fantastic. Can you imagine that? If you're shot, obviously you're supposed to lie down, right? And if you cheat, you're out, you're fired. But it would save on expenses, right? Because everyone is using the same kind of laser quest equipment. Of course, they can modify it themselves, increase range and stuff. That would be fantastic. That as an aside, Sidewinder, airsoft wouldn't get you the range of modern artillery, but laser quest, well, concentrated laser quest can. And so you still need to develop airplanes. You still need to have your air superiority. You still need to have your direct fire, indirect fire weapons, but it's all just laser tag, right? That would be so fun. Oh, that would be great. Can you imagine? We would save so much money. The world would be such a better place if we just, settled it. You still use your national borders, absolutely, but we would just have, perhaps under the auspicions of the United Nations. And fantastic, great idea. Okay, no, never mind. I'm not going to answer any other questions. We'll talk about it on Discord, because I do have to go sit in on that meeting. So thank you again very much for watching. In conclusion, don't Firefox, please don't do Chrome. And I definitely did not waste, how much? 52 minutes? 53 minutes of your time today. Oh, yeah. Actually, this is actually interesting. A Sidewinder, yes, because it is actually pronounced Krim, right? In German, you would write it Krim, Krim, right? And so yeah, it's a better pronunciation than Crimea, but that's English for you. English is we'll talk about how terrible English is another day. Anyway, yes, we're done now. Okay, bye.